Watch this. Now I'm going to highlight the valley of Elah.
How do you spell that, Amir?
E-L-A-H. Thank you. All right. Now, watch this. Philistines are on this side. Israelites are on this side. The Philistines are sending someone. Who do they send? Goliath. What's his height? 9 feet high. But Goliath's height is not the only thing. What was it? The armor. He had so much armor on him that he needed what? Some help. An armor bearer. So it's not exactly just Goliath coming here. Who is it exactly? Someone carrying Goliath's big shield, and Goliath is walking behind him. Just like that. You understand? He could hardly move. And he's walking from the area of the Philistines somewhere to this area. Now probably you're asking, how do you know it's here and not there? Or not over there? That's a good question. Well, I remember a few years ago I had a group of youth and I sent a team with two-way radio to the top of Azekah and another team to the top of Soko, and I asked them to tell me where should I be standing so both can see me. Because the whole point of the Philistines taking over these two is so they can see from those sides, both of them, exactly what's going on with Goliath. That explains to you why when David managed to run down the hill, cross the little creek bed that you will see in a sec, collecting smooth stones from right there, and you will see it right now. When David killed Goliath right here, then he stood right there, cut his head off, and what did he do with it? You understand? Look, you uncircumcised, pig-eating Gentile Philistine. You see this? This is the head. Uncircumcised. What I said?
Circumcised.
Uncircumcised.
Uncircumcised. That's what you said.
I meant uncircumcised, pig-eating Gentile Philistine. Your master, your champion, has no head. He lost his mind. You understand that?
Yes, we understand
That is the purpose of raising the head first. And then, of course, to show the children of Israel that we're hiding all over here. Look at this. He's dead. And suddenly all the children of Israel are the bravest soldiers in the world. They run all the way down here. And these Philistines are fleeing all the way down to where they came from. You understand? So this is the scene of the story. You know, I remember when I graduated from the tour guide academy, and they took about the 3 top students to meet with the president of Israel from every class. And when we were there in the house of the president, he greeted us. It was at that time Ezra Weizmann, and he said to us, "I want you to know that the best tour guide to the land of Israel is the Bible." And it's the Bible. Not a person called Bible. It's the Bible. And really, if you think about it, if we read now, can I have the Bible again? Can you hold this just a minute?
It's not mine.
All right. Now, when we read the story, things will be way clearer to you. Look how accurate 1 Samuel 17 was. Now the Philistines gathered their armies together to battle, and were gathered at Soko, which belonged to Judah. And they encamped between Soko and Azekah in Ephes Damim, between here and here. They were also in this area. And Saul and the men of Israel were gathered together, and they encamped in the valley of Elah, and drew up the battle array against the Philistines. The Philistines stood on a mountain on one side, and the Israel stood on a mountain on the other side, with a valley between them. See? And a champion went out from the camp of the Philistines, named Goliath from Gath, whose height was 6 cubits and a span, and he had a bronze helmet on his head, and he was armed with a coat of mail, and the weight of the coat was 5,000 shekels of bronze, and he had bronze armor on his legs, and bronze javelin between his shoulders. Now the staff of his spear was like a weaver's beam, and his iron spear had weighed 600 shekels, and a shield bearer went before him. See, he was not alone. And then he stood and cried out to the armies of Israel and said to them,
Why have you come out to the line up for battle? Am I not a Philistine, and you as servants of Saul? Choose a man for yourself and let him come down to me. If he is able to fight with me and kill me, then we will be your servants.
One thing for sure, I don't know if he knew how to fight, but he knew how to speak.
If he is able to fight, but if I prevail against him and kill him, then you shall be our servants and serve us.
And the Philistines said,
I defy the armies of Israel this day. Give me a man that we may fight together.
And when Saul and all Israel heard these words of the Philistines, they were dismayed and greatly afraid. Now David was the son of the Ephrathite of Bethlehem, Judah, whose name was Jesse, and who had 8 sons, and the man was old and advanced in years in the days of Saul. And the 3 oldest sons of Jesse had gone to follow Saul to the battle. The names of these 3 went to the battle was Eliab, the firstborn, Avinadav, and Shammah. David was the youngest, and the 3 oldest followed Saul. But David occasionally went and returned from Saul to feed his father's sheep at Bethlehem. And the Philistines drew near and presented himself 40 days, morning and evening. The name 40, the number 40, always has to do with trials. And the Philistine drew near and presented himself 40 days, as I said. And Jesse said to his son David, Take now for your brothers an ephah of this dried grain and these 10 loaves, and run to your brothers at the camp, and carry these 10 cheeses to the captain of their thousands, and see how your brothers fare, and bring back news of them. Now Saul and they and all the men of Israel were in the valley of Elah fighting with the Philistines. Yeah, sure. Now watch this. That's what at least the rest of the nation thought, that they're fighting with the Philistines. So David rose early in the morning. He left the sheep with a keeper and took the things and went as Jesse had commanded him. And he came all the way to the camp as the army was going out to the fight and shouting for the battle. For Israel and the Philistines had drawn up in battle array, army against army. And David left his supplies in the hands of the supply keeper, ran to the army, and came and greeted his brothers. Then as he talked with them, there was a champion, the Philistines of Gath, Goliath by name, and he came from the armies of the Philistines, and he spoke according to the same words. So David heard them, and all the men of Israel, when they saw the man, fled from him and were dreadfully afraid. So the men of Israel said, Have you seen this man who has come up? Surely he has come up to defy Israel. And it shall be that all the men who kills him, the king will enrich with great riches, will give him his daughter, and give his father's house exemption from taxes in Israel. First tax break in the history. Then David spoke to the men who stood by him and say, What shall be done for the man who kills this Philistine and takes away the reproach from Israel? For who is the uncircumcised Philistine that he should